hello and Jai Jinendra, everyone. We're now back from our 5-minute break. And for the next part of today's conference, it's my pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Nirva Patel. I've just learned that she currently has COVID, so we're very grateful and appreciative that she's joining us today despite not feeling well. I know many of us are looking forward to her presentation. Nirva Patel is the Global Policy Fellow in the Brooks McCormick Jr. Animal Law Policy Program at Harvard Law. She is a registered patent attorney, a biomedical engineer, and a passionate advocate for animal welfare. Nirva is the executive producer of several plant-based films, including The Game Changers, The End of Medicine, and Meet Me Halfway. She most recently served as the chair of the board of directors for the Farm Sanctuary, where she worked to address interrelated social injustices rooted in animal agriculture. She has experience with animal advocacy in both the US and India, having led several successful campaigns, including a ban on the sale of fur in Weston and Lexington, Massachusetts. Nirva holds a Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Engineering from Boston University, a JD from the New England School of Law, and an MS in Animals and Public Policy from Tufts University. Her passion for animals was predicated by the Jain philosophy of ahiṃsā, nonviolence, which advocates for a vegan lifestyle. She lives in Boston with her husband, 4 children, and 2 rescued rabbits. And now passing it over to you, Nirva.
So thank you so much. Thank you, Nisha. Thank you to Hope and to Dr. Miller for this, for inviting me to be your keynote, and for bringing this conference to everybody today. I think this is the first of its kind, and it's pretty impressive with your group of speakers. And the keynote for tomorrow is someone that I truly admire. I know Pramoda Ben, and I have just so much respect for everybody that's here today. My topic, and I also want to thank everybody here for attending and taking time out of your weekend. I know it's busy and it's the end of fall, so it's great to be here. My topic today is the importance of Jainism in the vegan movement. And one would think that both are completely aligned and in sync. But the reality is that Jainism, the way it is popularly practiced, must take a stronger stance against the consumption of dairy. If that occurs, and I hope it really does one day, the two philosophies together have the greatest potential to truly defend the doctrine of ahiṃsā. And I do think it occurs in silos, but the interconnection has to be solidified, it has to be undeniable, it has to be constantly restated. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a small town called Ashland, Massachusetts, with very strong Jain values. In fact, my dad is on this call right now. And we ate vegetarian food. We were probably the only vegetarians in our town, and definitely the only vegetarians at our school. We packed school lunch. We learned about foods like meatloaf and chicken fingers and hot dogs. And we had no idea how much meat people actually ate. I was always taken aback by even just the smells around me, the smells of salami. As Jain kids, my father taught us all the prayers. We would say Nokar mantra that's the main Jain prayer every single night. We went to the Jain community in Massachusetts had this, they were so organized, and they rented this big church in Norwood. And that's where we would gather, and we would bounce ideas off of each other. We would talk about what it's like to grow up Jain in America. We would go to the Jain Center 2 to 3 times a month, and we participated in just about everything. We attended Bathshala classes. We focused on meditation. We attended lectures by visiting Jain saints known as Mara Sahibs. We really felt the energy, the prominence of the temple. And I look back and I think, wow, our parents, wow. I mean, they were focused on just taking in this new environment, being in a new country, learning a new language, figuring out where all the food is, but they still figured out a way to gather and get all of us Jains together, despite it being a small community. And they did that because it was just so important to them. It was so much a part of their identity and their value system. As first generation kids, we laughed, we played, we prayed, we debated, and ultimately we had this amazing place of peace and of belonging. And at that time, being vegetarian, not even vegan, but being vegetarian was so alien to society. So the Jain Center was a place to further reinstate our ideals and also just have a place to share experiences. Because there was a lot of bullying going on at school. If you packed food like an Indian vegetable with burrata, and we all tried that. You would open your lunch dabba and people would be like, "Oh my God, what is that smell? What is that?" And so you were strongly discouraged if you didn't assimilate into the culture, the diet culture at your school. Okay. So I'm 100% sure that my Jain upbringing had everything to do with my life choices. Since I was a child, I had incredible respect and fascination for animals. I simply could not understand how such magical creatures were eaten every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Even snacks. The kids in the classroom would sing Old MacDonald's Farm, and the next minute they're going into the playground and like gnawing on beef jerkies. What is a beef? It was just so different for us and so foreign to even witness all of this. I knew that there wasn't really a path in animal protection, or a career path, at least at that time. And it was categorized in my mind as a hobby or an interest, or so what I did was what every Indian kid did at that time. I tried my best to be successful, and the most successful I could be academically. And I wanted my parents to be proud of me. So I would have, yes, loved to combine my passion for animals into my studies, but I couldn't see a clear path. So I loved math and science, and my dad was an engineer and my mom was a lawyer. So I did the most logical thing, and I enrolled in what was arguably the most difficult major at BU, because that's what Indian kids did. That's what first gen Indian kids did. We had to take 133 credits. Everyone else had to take 128. But I liked this major because it was intense, and it also felt like it would allow me to apply for the best jobs available at the time. Never did I think that animals or my true passion could be factored into what I do professionally. While I enjoyed the rigor, and I truly did, I quickly realized that biomedical engineering was not what I wanted to do. I had firsthand experience of the horrors in the labs, and I knew I had to pivot, but it was hard. And it was almost impossible to pay the bills, to look at job offerings. So I accepted a job at a pharma company, which was later acquired by Pfizer. And it was at that job that I decided to try and divert. Oh, turn on. Okay, sorry. Okay, I'm just 2 slides behind. Okay. Sometimes it takes a constant effort, and you may feel stuck doing something that doesn't align with your moral compass or your ethical values. And then one day there will be this opportunity to combine your passion, your need to serve, and your career. And so my advice is to everybody out there who is thinking about their first career or even their second career in life, don't lose that vision, because it does happen if you maintain that conviction. So I found an opportunity to move in a direction where I could make some change. I applied to a work study program at my workplace. So as long as I could work during the day, I could attend any classes at night, as long as it didn't conflict with my work schedule or the 9 to 5 time, the time frame. So I enrolled on a whim. I enrolled at New England School of Law, and I worked from 9 to 5. And then from 5 to 6, I commuted from Cambridge all the way to Boston, which takes a lot of time because you have to switch from the red line to the green line. And then my classes started sharp at 6. I don't even think I ate dinner, but I continued 3 times a week classes until 9:30 at night. And then I would fall asleep on the train and then do my homework and make it back home. And these are kind of crazy days, but I did that for 4 years, and I loved studying law. I dreamt about a lucrative career. I looked at women's studies. It kind of opened my eyes up from the engineering aspect of what I had studied before. So after law school, I got my a dream job. I worked at Nixon Peabody, and which is one of Boston's largest firms. And although I didn't have that traditional background at all, I was right there with Harvard and Stanford law students, and we were all having a good time, except I was the only one who had paid off my loan. So I was really excited about that. Okay, so then things changed. So I got married, and my life took me to Mumbai, and because of my husband's work. And I lived in Mumbai for 8 years, where I delivered 4 beautiful children. And at that time, I had thought, okay, so I went from engineering to law. I'm getting closer to what I want to do, but I really had time to think about what I really, really loved, my true passion. And I remembered Jainism. I just living there in India, driving around, you end up seeing so much torture. When you go to the markets, you see, people breaking chickens' necks. Like when you're picking out mangoes, you see so many street animals that are hit on the side of the road. I remember I was even once there with my dad, and we were in a rickshaw or something coming from Matunga to Colaba, and there was a dog in the middle of the road, and the dog was having seizures, and no one did anything. Like the dog was just apparently, hit by a car. So we pleaded with the rickshaw driver, and we said, can we pick up the dog? And he was like, I don't know, will you pay me more? And so we picked up the dog, and we brought the dog to a hospital. And these hospitals are so sophisticated, and they're animal hospitals, and they're all driven by charitable donations. I don't know how we found that hospital. We must have called a bunch of people. We got there. The dog ended up passing away, but we tried everything in our power to save that dog. And that dog represents so many stories like that. There was a kitten that was estranged from probably her mom, during the Ganpati festivals, where they have a lot of firecrackers going on, and then there was birds, and there was other dogs, and there was just so much going on with the animals. And I realized this is what I'm the most passionate about. This is what I loved as a child. This is what I've loved throughout my life. This is where I want to be the most helpful. So in India, there was that other side of me that said, but that's not really possible. So I tried working at a law firm. But I couldn't practice as a U.S. attorney. I volunteered at orphanages, but I was told to go home because there were so many meningitis scares. And as a pregnant woman, I couldn't, it was just too dangerous for me. I searched for animal rights projects. I visited the PETA India office, and they were just this small little office, and they were doing great work, but they weren't big enough to find a place for me to really be helpful. Everyone knew I was vegan, so there was this Mara Sahib who was in town, and he was giving this amazing lecture on the connection between veganism and Jainism, and I attended his lecture, and there's a picture of him up here, and that was incredibly, incredibly inspiring. So I was trying to learn and do whatever I could do to get up to speed on veganism, and hopefully find some way to enter this space. And after those years in India, we moved back to Boston, and I still hadn't found that career aspect. I was just kind of raising my children, and it's very busy, as everybody knows who does that. So how did I go from being pregnant in Mumbai to being a Harvard animal rights lawyer? I'll try to explain, but you would be surprised how many doors open for you when you constantly tell people about what you're most passionate about, when you take your friends to vegan restaurants, when you research, when you participate in conferences like this, the doors start to open. And I actually, when I was putting this presentation together, I found this old interview of that I did a while ago in Boston. And the advice still stands: follow your passion, be yourself, and don't fulfill someone else's dream. If you follow someone else's version of your perfect self, you'll waste an entire lifetime coming right back to what your passions were when you were young. So remember who you were when you were young. What did you love? What made you truly happy? Explore and drive forward, but always look in the rearview mirror. So that's my my philosophy. So what I did was I got involved at school. If you're a busy mom, get involved at school with school lunch. If you go to the office every day, lobby for vegan meals. If you work in a public facing industry like an airline or a museum, know your power, advocate for compassionate meals because the public can benefit. I signed up for the annual chili cook-off. And I was, I think, the first person in history to make a vegan chili at my kids' school. And I was even told off by some parents that, well, chili, that's such an American tradition. Chili is just, it's always meat, you know, vegan and chili that's an oxymoron. We don't know what you're doing. But I showed up every year and the kids loved it. And I actually almost won, but I lost to a very favored science teacher. So that was okay. But, you know, I've lobbied the head chef and headmaster at my kids' school to serve vegan meals, and everybody's reluctant at first. But if you prepare your pitch really well and ahead of time, you'll be prepared for the conversation. So this is how I did it. I talked about, okay, my kids spend this much time at school and they're starving while all of these other kids have 2 hot options for food. My kids, and they're like, well, you have the salad bar, you know, there's this great salad bar and your kids can have salad and chickpeas. And you know, the chickpeas was always right next to the tuna fish, and the tuna fish spilled over into the chickpeas. And I was like, okay, so let me get this straight. And this is where I kind of brought my little equal rights lawyer lobbying in. I said, so let me get this straight. We are vegan because of our religion, and our choice is a cold salad bar. But everybody else is not vegan, and they have 2 hot options. So how are you giving more preference and more accommodation for one religious group over another religious group? And that's where Jainism is so important, because you can say that at a school. And when you talk about religious accommodation, they have to listen to you. I mean, they would be crazy if they didn't, especially if it's a publicly funded school or a publicly funded workplace or a publicly funded museum. They can't tolerate, they can't favor one religious diet over another. So what happens is when you have those conversations and you do it very nicely, it's amazing how people want to, first they fight, first they're a little difficult, and then they start, like the chef was like, oh my, did I tell you about my sister-in-law who's also vegan and she's a famous chef? And I was like, oh my gosh, let's get some recipes from her. And we just started working together. And now at that school, and my kids no longer go to that school anymore, there is a hot vegan meal every single day. And a lot of the non-vegan kids eat that, are happy to eat that. So beautiful things can happen as a result of some of these conversations, which you may think are tough, but they're not tough at all. Okay, so after all those years of living in India, I visited the Jain Center in Burlington, and I had grown up going to the Norwood one, but I went to the Jain Center in Burlington, and it was so lovely to be there. After so many years, it felt like home. And I remember praying, and then kind of, I was like, oh, should I look around? Should I look around? And I looked around, and I saw ghee like everywhere, and I saw these ghee diyas all over the place. And I was like, oh man, like, okay, I have to do something about this. So I emailed a few people, everyone I could find out that was linked to some sort of leadership level at the Jain Center. And I didn't hear back from anyone. And I basically said, look, you know, why are we still using ghee at Jain Centers? Like, do you understand the connection between dairy and violence? And, you know, of all places, the temple should not be having ghee diyas. It doesn't make any sense to me. Can someone explain this to me? No one got back to me except for one person who agreed. And I was like, oh yes, I found someone who agrees with me. And then he was like, yeah, but don't even bother. I've had this conversation before and it never went anywhere. So So then I was like, okay, let me think a little bigger. So I circulated a national petition just on change.org. And we got a lot of signatures. I don't know where we are today, but it was basically a petition to stop the use of dairy in Jain temples during Paryushana. And I went back to the Jain Center a month later, and I noticed, even though no one got back to me, I noticed that all of the ghee was gone. And all of the diyas were replaced by battery operated diyas. And it's a point that I'm making, that sometimes you think people are not listening to you, but it's really that they just don't want to have the conversation with you. It's too direct. It's too much conflict, but they hear you. So don't stop saying, talking to people and having conversations, because you just never know who's listening. So I thought that was a beautiful, beautiful story. Another way I got involved, I mean, this is all in my pursuit of trying to figure out how to be in this space. In my hometown in Weston, I actually read this, a local newspaper, and I learned about a professor in the town next to me in Wellesley who had banned the sale of fur in Wellesley. And that was the first town in Massachusetts. And I was like, how did she do it? So I called her up, and I asked her, what did you do? Who did you talk to? And she gave me it was a wonderful conversation. She told me exactly what to do. And she said, the only thing you really have to do is you have to convince everybody in your town. And this was in the middle of COVID. I called up the Weston Town Hall and I said, what do I have to do? And they said, well, you need 10 signatures, and they have to be by registered voters, and they have to be wet signatures. I'm like, what do you mean by wet? And they were like, you can't get an online signature. I was like, but it's COVID. Everyone's terrified to see each other. How am I going to get these signatures? And they said, well, you have to figure it out. So my kids and I went to the only place where I could get wet, cold, live signatures. And that was at the town garbage dump. So we went to the dump, and we stood out there in the cold, and we had masks on, and we had banners up, and we got our signatures, and we got a lot of animosity too. In fact, someone gave me the middle finger too, but it was great. We got our signatures, and then I got on the agenda for the town meeting, which happens once a year, and every town is different, and all of you guys can do this in your town. Some towns have an open forum, and some towns have representative voting. So in my town, I had to stand in front of everybody who attended that meeting, and I gave a speech, and I talked about the cruelty. I talked about the fact that fur is not necessary, but I didn't blame everybody. I didn't attack everybody. I actually said, look, you love nature. Everyone in this town loves animals. Everyone goes for walks in this town. You're being lied to when you're told that fur is not cruel. And you wouldn't stand for something like this if you knew exactly what it was. And people started nodding, and they were like, yeah. And the ban passed. And then we did it again. We did it in Lexington, where my in-laws live, and my father-in-law and my kids did the same ban in Lexington, and they passed it in Lexington too. So these are the types of things that you can do to be involved, to take some action, even if you don't have a clear career path in front of you. The other thing I did was I dined at every vegan restaurant I could find. I ordered the entire menu, like most vegans do. I talked to so many vegans. I learned their stories. I was lucky to be an executive director of so many documentaries, including The Game Changers, The End of Medicine, Meet Me Halfway. It was a great time. This was 2019 for the vegan movement, because people were listening to the stories of athletes who had done their own research. They read the China study, and which was actually originated based on a study in India that then became the China study. But they read about it. They read about athletic performance, and they were convinced that a plant-based diet, eating the right plant-based foods, led to optimal performance and recovery. So it was a very cool time, and that was a great journey. The other thing I also did was I joined a lot of nonprofit boards. So I reached out to my network. I made cold calls. Farm Sanctuary is the largest animal sanctuary in America. And if you haven't been there, it's fantastic. They have over 1,000 animals. They have cows. They have all the animals that are part of our what are considered food animals live there, and they live there for their entire lives. So they're allowed to grow old. So I joined that board. I joined the board of the International Anti-Poaching Foundation. I joined the board of the Vegan Film Festival, and they have this one-stop shop for all the films relating to animals or veganism or the plant-based movement. Some of them are really hard to watch, but I suggest looking at them and acquainting yourself with the films that have changed so much in our movement. I also wrote some articles about places that called themselves sanctuaries, but they weren't. They just supported animal agriculture on a smaller scale. So I do believe that all of these efforts made me feel really, really satisfied, and all of them stemmed from just growing up with Jain values. And most importantly, I went back to school. So without understanding the history of animal rights, I was poorly equipped to make any change. I enrolled in the master's program at Tufts University in animals and public policy. I studied animal rights versus animal welfare. I studied the wildlife laws, the policy monopolies of the pork industry. I loved it so much. I was definitely the oldest person in my class, but I graduated with a 4.0, and I gave the graduation speech because I was so passionate about it. The program also operates as a vet school and has a small dairy on it. So I met and I saw some of the players in the animal agricultural industry who have justified commoditizing animals. It's critical to understand what we're up against when you want to be a player in the vegan movement. You need to understand how people rationalize what they do, and you need to understand how their opinions are based. So it's cognitive dissonance in every aspect, but some people have a bad case of it and some people have a mild case of it, but it's there. I reluctantly and sadly met the chickens who were mail ordered, who never saw the light of day, never saw sunlight. I held baby pigs who squealed so cutely in my arms, who would be slaughtered at the age of 2. And I witnessed a farmer artificially inseminate a cow with a long metal rod. And this is something that a lot of people, I know a lot of the questions the Q&A was asking, and we spoke about this. This is a horrific process, and it happens, and it's justified by farmers, because farmers will say, well, this is a better process than a 1,500-pound bull attacking a cow. They're both violent processes, and this happens with every single glass of milk that you drink.
Let's not waste too much time, guys. Let's go and get started here with a shoulder width stance.
Oh, I don't know what that was. Okay. So my thesis project was on India's dairy industry, the environmental, religious, economic, and political impact on an industry of that size. And a component of the program was to do an externship, which I did at Harvard Law School. And I had been following the program since 2016 when I attended they had a conference for the 50th anniversary of the Animal Welfare Act. And I learned about this incredible program that has, it's the first of its kind. It's a powerhouse for making long-lasting change for animals in our society. They talk about the vegan movement, plant-based products, companies, marketing. It's high levels of research facing animals. And the other component of the program is, so there's the research side, and then there's the clinic side, where you have the law students at Harvard Law School taking electives and being the attorneys for our clients in the animal protection space. So I had an incredible experience, and then I was hired by the program in January of 2022, and I work there now as a global policy fellow. And I continue to engage in so many projects that defend animals, and it's very, very rewarding. So if you are interested in a career path or interested in advocacy for animal rights, I would definitely check out the ALDF job board. I think it's like the most comprehensive job board for people seeking jobs in this field, and you'd be surprised. These jobs, yeah, you're in animal protection, but the jobs are well paid. And the benefits are pretty amazing, dental and health, and it's just like any other job, but you have to do some digging. You have to look at sanctuary job boards, and just get out there, you know, have like start a vegan lunch or a documentary group, start a book club. Your first book could be Dr. Melanie Joy's book, which is one of my favorite books on cognitive dissonance, which is titled Why Do We Love Dogs, What and Eat Pigs and Wear Cows. It's a phenomenal book. So I would recommend that as one of the steps that you take. But now I want to segue a little bit and get to the core of my conversation, the importance of Jainism to veganism, and the importance of veganism also to Jainism. And the amazing things about the vegan movement is that the vegan movement doesn't shy away from the dairy conversation the way the Jain community sometimes does. And that bold step by the vegan movement has allowed thousands of vegan products to surface, activism to thrive, and businesses to flourish. I could never understand as a kid why we shied away from the dairy conversation at the Jain Center. Were people so committed to habit? Did they just not understand that it was so cruel? But it felt like people loved the status quo. They just didn't want to change. They just wanted things to stay the same. And they were doing a wonderful job. I mean, they're a vegetarian after all. They felt that what they were doing was enough. So people sometimes refer to old scriptures and justified ghee in that way too. So I just want to say it's so important to understand that your values, your current values, should always trump history, always. History hasn't always been on the right side of things too. And I'm not saying anything was wrong with historical interpretations of Jainism, but trust your logic today. Ask yourself, what I'm doing, is what I'm doing violent? Well, I don't think so, but let's really do some research and find out. We need to be more bold. And we need to work with the vegan movement because we are so interconnected and we can help in huge ways. And before I go into that, I want to share a story that helped me, and I hope it helps you go from being vegetarian to vegan. And I mean, this did it for me in like right after I heard the story. So I'm going to talk to you about a veterinarian named Dr. Holly Cheever. And she practices in upstate New York. She graduated summa cum laude from Harvard University, and then she got her vet degree at Cornell University, and she was #1 in her class. And she's given a few speeches. She's all over, Google on her observations as a vet. And one of her stories is truly, truly unforgettable. So one day, a farmer called her up and asked her to check out a strange situation with one of her cows. He said, "Something's wrong with my cow." So she ran down there and she asked the farmer, like, "Tell me about the cow." So he said, "Well, she's had 4 previous lactations, which translates to 4 previous deliveries. And, where she went into labor, and her baby was taken away within milliseconds after delivery, and then she was milked." Now, this is a small dairy in Maine. So after these cows aren't tied up in a factory farm or anything, they get to go into pasture all day long, but they are impregnated and they do have to be milked. So after giving birth to her 5th calf, like every other time, the farmer took her baby away and then sent her over to, the pasture. And so she roamed in the pasture, and then at a certain time, she has to come back in and she has to be milked. So when he milked her or attempted to milk her, the strangest thing happened. And she had no milk, none at all. And so Dr. Cheever was like, this is so strange. Let me examine her. And she was in perfect health. So, and remember, at this point, a cow on day 1 after delivering a baby would have 100 pounds of milk, or 12 gallons of milk in that one day. And she had none, not a single drop. So she couldn't figure it out. So she went home that day, and on day 5, she got another call, and the farmer said, "Still no milk." So Dr. Cheever came down and examined her, and she was in perfect health. She didn't check the baby because she hadn't seen the baby. The baby's completely away from her. but it was a mystery and she couldn't figure it out. No one could figure it out. And then on day 11, Dr. Cheever got a frantic call from the farmer. And he said, "Doc, I figured out the answer. This cow had delivered twins, and she had a memory of her previous 4 babies gone and never seen again. She not only had the memory, she made a plan. She executed her plan, and she kept one baby in the woods. And this baby was hidden. And every day she would go out to pasture and she would feed her baby, and she would spend time with her baby, and she would love her baby. And then when she would come back, her udders were completely empty." So one baby went to the farmer, one baby was hidden, and she thought she did it. So when Dr. Cheever heard about this, she pleaded with the farmer, and she said, "Please let her keep this baby." And the farmer said, "No, to me, it's business. It's a sad story, but it's business." And it was a baby boy. So with baby boys, they're of no use to a dairy farm. So he went straight to the veal factory and was killed at 6 months old. So remember that story. Always remember that story, because memory, loss, sorrow, passion, the ability to make a plan to help her and her baby. Animals don't express emotions with their faces, but they express them by actions. And it doesn't mean that those emotions are not there. So share this story with others, and just know that there's a lot more going on with animals than we think. And whether it's a big factory, a small farm, Ahimsa milk, or a factory farm, all of that supports this kind of injustice. If we're united as Jains, we need to make certain changes. We need to stop and at least discourage the things that that are so violent that you kind of see in the Jain centers all the time. It seems like if it's not the actual animal flesh, like meat or gelatin, everything else is kind of allowed. So this applies to, pearls and silk and leather and yogurt and, not just dairy, but all of these products that are so violent. So, I mean, to make one silk sari, you have to boil live 10,000 silk worms. For pearls, you first insert this foreign object into an oyster, into the shell, and then the poor thing is trying so hard to get rid of that and to cover it, and that becomes the pearl. And when you extract that pearl, you have to kill the oyster. And these are things that you do see. You do see women wearing pearls. You do see silk saris. I mean, you're seeing it less and less, but you do see that. And it's something that we need to make a stance against. Jainism should be really determined by, I know we have this system of 1 cent, 2 cents, 3 cents, but it's really like the level of violence and whether there are alternatives. Like for all of this stuff, like you don't need to wear silk. You don't need to wear pearls. You don't need to wear leather. Today, there are options to replace all of that. So we really need a consistent message to everybody. And we need to understand dairy. It's very hard to tell someone that we forbid carrots, but we allow milk products that are inextricably connected to cruelty. And these are pictures of what they do to baby cows in small farms. They put these spikes up to their nose so they can't suckle on their mom. That is so cruel. And that is how you get your glass of milk or your dahi or your ghee. So remember that picture too. And let's stop being confusing. Jainism can be more confusing since certain byproducts are on the no list. Root vegetables are forbidden because of the destruction of surrounding teeny tiny microorganisms and the permanent nature of the extraction. But how does this suffering compare to a 5 cents being who is held down by her neck and forcibly raped? Or the 5 days of crying and mooing after her baby's taken away? Eggs are forbidden because of the potential for life. But how does this compare to a baby cow who, in Dr. Cheever's story, who had the potential for life? Honey is forbidden because of the disruption to bees and because it's their main sustenance. How does this compare to baby cows' main sustenance that is then consumed by humans? As Jains, we need to adopt vegan values fully. And we need to keep the justifications for root vegetables, eggs, and honey. I'm not denying that, but we can't operate with inconsistencies for all other types of suffering. We have to give clear messages to the next generation, clear messages of veganism. If it's hard at first, let's focus on sacred times and events like Paryushana, and then we go one step further and one step further. It's, when there's confusion, human beings rely on habitual behavior, and we need to be very careful as Jains to be as consistent as possible. And I just want to mention, I just have to talk about Balitana because it's located, everyone knows, 50 kilometers from Bhavnagar. Balitana is a major site, a pilgrimage site for Jains, and it is a vegetarian city, and it's beautiful. And in 2014, 200 Jain, it wasn't always vegetarian, but in 2014, 200 Jain monks went on a hunger strike to ban 250 butcher shops, and also declare the town as a meat-free zone. The sale of eggs and meat is prohibited, as well as the slaughter of animals. But as you walk down the hill, after praying to dozens of idols along the way, there are so many yogurt vendors, and many ghee, yogurt, butter, and paneer farms and vendors all over Balitana. Yogurt's a funny thing in Jainism because the milk component is almost completely overlooked, while the timing of when to eat yogurt is obsessed over. So because yogurt has such a high concentration of microorganisms, more violence is caused. Like they did this equation, more violence is caused if you eat it after a day or so. So in order to make it okay, Jains will eat yogurt as quickly as possible on the first day to reduce the violence. But this completely ignores the fact that milk was used to make it, the milk that was used to make it was so cruel. So the focus is on the microorganisms versus the cruel dairy process. And we're kind of thinking about it in the wrong way. And I cannot tell you how many times people say, well, back in the day, in my village, we loved our water buffalo, and we only milked her when she wanted us to, and to relieve her of the excruciating pain of being having too much milk in her system. And I totally disagree, because even if none of the torture was there, even if there was no violence and everyone's really nice to these cows, you're still, you're still touching her body. You're still taking something from her that was meant for her baby. Just like an egg that has the potential for life, the intention for life, just like the egg, and what's on the chicken's mind with the egg, the milk has the same intentions for her, the potential to promote life. And we're interfering with her body, we're touching her, and we're taking from her. So I don't even think we get to the welfare part of the conversation when we think about her body and her right to her own body. Who are we to then just say, hey, like if I was breastfeeding my child and someone came over and said, oh, hold on one second, I'm really nice to you and I'll get you a Starbucks latte, but can I just take an ounce of that? And if that was considered okay today, that would be ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, because no one should touch me. And that's the same thing for the cows. It's important to understand also the concept of luxury, which I see a lot in the Jain community. True luxury is compassionate consumption and making choices that align with our ethics. When I circulated a petition a few years ago, I was met with, well, we only use the best ghee. We use Amul ghee because Amul ghee is 100% cow. There's no water buffalo stuff in there. So that's what we use in our Jain temples. Well, it's just, the focus was on the purity of ghee, but we completely missed the conversation on the cruelty. So we have to also understand that luxury is just, it's artificial. It's artificially dictated by society. And you should really think long and hard about your choices and your values and the luxury of your own religion and the choices that you're making. And don't believe the humane washing tactics. You know, people also justify drinking milk because of these so-called ahiṃsā dairy farms. And someone mentioned it earlier. If you really think about it, the economics of it, yeah, they could, you know, it's probably much nicer than a factory farm, but at some point there's a problem of overpopulation. And the baby, you can't keep all the babies there, the moms there, the dads there. You will sell those babies, and those babies are sold for probably a profit, and they're sold to places that will slaughter them or put them in another horrific dairy farm. So even a ahiṃsā milk is another, and you're also taking from her. You're participating in the taking. So that doesn't really make much sense. And then I think you need to ask yourself, what's holding you back? Chai boils, if you love chai, which I do, it boils exactly the same way, exactly as if you use oat milk. And oat milk is available at every grocery store in the US for the US audience. Curry, I can make curry with Kite Hill yogurt, and it tastes the same. And guess what? There's no cholesterol in it. Cakes, cookies, desserts, you can totally make them all or buy them at stores, or skip them. You don't need to eat dessert every single day. And fasting, which many Jains have done as kids, fasting is a incredible superpower, which you have developed, the ability to restrain yourself from things that, you know, your body probably doesn't need. So really think about what you're asking for here. I make rotli. I make Indian food. I lean on my Indian diet, and I make rotli, and I use vegan butter. And my kids love it. They absolutely love it. They gobble it up. So there are so many options, and they're all available today, now more so than they ever have been. So lean on those decisions. And I want to just further emphasize that Jainism can be instrumental to long-lasting change in everyday society. We just need to be aligned on the undeniable connection between veganism and Jainism. And just imagine the impact. Imagine your kids going to public school lunch. Imagine if it was universally understood that there has to be a religious accommodation for Jainism, and that it goes hand in hand. Whether you're a vegan child or a Jain child trying to do the right thing, you're faced with a lunch designed for a meat-eating population. My son's school has cleaning duty where he has to wipe off trays that have all this meat on it, and he just has to suck it up and do that. But imagine if I could say, well, that's actually against his religion, and even the dairy part and the milk and the cheese, he shouldn't really be touching that. It would be incredible and very powerful. Imagine going on an airplane and ordering a vegan meal. All of these things are campaigns and advocacy that all of us can work on together. So there are steps we can take as Jains that will help the vegan movement. The first, I think, is, and it's amazing how a couple of Jain centers have gone completely vegan, and I applaud everybody who made that happen. It's pretty phenomenal. But why can't we all go vegan? All of us can. I mean, it's something that we should try. Reach out to the people that are running your Jain center. We should all be doing that. Write letters to airlines encouraging vegan options and explain to them what vegan means. Write letters to your local schools asking for an equivalent hot protein-packed meal for vegans. These are just letters, and if they have enough letters coming at them, and you mentioned religious accommodation, it will happen. So I don't know if I went over my time, but I want to thank you, and I hope you really enjoy the rest of the conference. And if you would like to reach out to me, my email's there at Harvard. And if you're ever in Boston, definitely look me up. Here's a picture of my 2 rescued rabbits who I didn't make vegan. They are vegan, so that's a great pet to have if you really want pets at home. They'll eat all the vegetables your kids don't want to eat. And they're rescued from a local farm that shut down during the COVID pandemic. And then these are my 4 amazing children who we were at the temple in Balkeshwar this summer. And thank you so much. It was amazing to be here.